Good morning. My name is Gia Hodges. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the webinar, Proactively Monitoring Your Applications Built on Multiple Technologies. Today's speakers will be Ted Wilson, COO of SL Corporation, and Glenn Edivane, our Senior Solutions Engineer. Throughout the event, please feel free to submit your questions located on the panel located at the right-hand side of your screen. We'll answer as many as possible after the presentation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Ted.
Thank you, Gia, and thank you to everyone on the webinar today. Today, we're going to talk about monitoring for your critical applications and services that are built on messaging and integration middleware and related technologies, and the related technologies you typically would see in a modern application. Here's an agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of monitoring modern application architectures, how it's becoming more complicated, not less, and then what that really means to you, and then what the value of monitoring means not only to the business and to you specifically. Then we'll talk about RTView Enterprise and the different kinds of monitoring and alerting we provide, and then we'll move on to the demo. So I want to start by giving you a quick look at who we are and where we came from. SL is a privately held software company in the San Francisco Bay Area. We've been around for more than 25 years. And our background is in the visualization of highly complex mission-critical systems, such as industrial automation, process control, and aerospace, including a number of applications with NASA and the Launch Control Center for the Space Shuttle. So we understand mission critical and we understand real time. That's part of our DNA. We moved to the enterprise around 15, 16 years ago and developed the RTView monitoring platform. Now, there are a lot of companies in the monitoring space, and it's a crowded space, as you know. What makes SL different is our expertise around the monitoring of the middleware and the applications that run on it. Integration and messaging middleware are complex and very difficult to monitor effectively by a lot of the current monitoring products that are out there, including APM tools, unless you want to do a lot of custom work and code injection. So we have some very unique capability there, and we're going to show you that now. We also have a very close relationship with TIBCO and Solace and Software AG. TIBCO and Solace resell standalone versions of RTView, monitoring of their technologies that they sell to their customer base. So we're well known in the middleware monitoring space. First off, monitoring is as critical as it ever was. I think just about everyone on this webinar will agree that IT challenges are getting worse, not better. As application stacks become more dynamic and deployment options increase, ensuring application uptime becomes more challenging. And because of staff reductions, you're probably having to do more with less. Your job scope is probably becoming wider, broader, and you're having to support more technologies with fewer people than you did 2 years ago, and more technologies at the same time. So it's tricky. An interesting point is that developers are spending most of their time now maintaining existing applications and not developing new ones. Monitoring can help because monitoring helps support teams and DevOps teams to proactively see issues before business applications are affected. So people will have fewer incidents, and for the incidents they do, they can resolve them more quickly. So those are great drivers for benefits that we see. We've worked with a lot of companies to develop effective business cases so they can get monitoring investments approved by management. And there are a lot of reasons for putting monitoring in place, including a lot of soft benefits, such as improvements to the brand, happier customers, fewer engineers on conference calls. Those are all very real benefits, but they're hard to get the accounting teams behind building a business case around often because they're too subjective. But the two that we find that are not arguable are reducing the number of severity 1 outages and incidents, and for those incidents that you do have, reducing the time that it takes to fix them because you know where to look. Those are very measurable and those are very real. And if you're using a good trouble ticketing system such as ServiceNow, you probably have that data available as a good baseline to look at performance improvements that you get with monitoring. We also have on this URL on our website, we have top of the list, we have 3 featured customers, including Wells Fargo Bank, Citibank, and a large personal lines insurance company that have reviewed in these success stories their improvements in those areas and reducing their incidents. So if you have a minute and you're interested in getting more on that, go here and You'll learn a little bit more about that. We can also help in building out business cases. We have good tools and experience doing that for anybody that could use help. So those are great benefits for the company, right? It's good for the company to be able to affect those areas of improvement. But what does that mean for me? What does that mean for you as an admin or as an engineer that's having to put these systems in place to monitor? Well, with what we think of as the right monitoring approach, which is non-intrusive and agentless wherever possible, it means that you can eliminate a lot of the time that you would spend maintaining agents, deploying and maintaining agents. With most systems out there, you have to install agents on every server, and that's not easy in a large system. You can also, with agents, you do get false positives, so you can reduce those, which make life easier for you on a personal level. It takes less time to install and maintain systems that don't use agents. So those are some of the benefits around using non-intrusive approaches. There are other benefits as well for you personally. A lot of the people that we've worked with in the past spend a big part of their day providing management and application owners with information that those groups need to do their jobs. You have to do a lot of ad hoc querying of data, going back in to figure out what your performance are. What you can do with the right monitoring system that has the ability to provide custom views of information is that you can give those internal users the ability to self-serve for the information they need. So what you're able to do is to create custom views of information, save it, publish it, and give it that URL to an internal user, and you're done. They can self-serve going forward. Now, I think the most interesting part's that you can free up time for far more rewarding work. And here's an interpretation of an admin guy who's got so much time now because of his effective monitoring that's in place. He's able to do things like fishing from a drone. So you can see he sitting here drinking a beer in his lawn chair. I think he's having fun doing that. Okay. So let's take a quick look at the two different kinds of monitoring that you can get with RTView Enterprise. The first is for applications and supporting services. Users are able to basically, and users tend to be, for this type of monitoring, they tend to be the application support teams and the application owners. But they care about the business application, and they want to be able to understand if there are issues from an application level. So what we're able to provide, one of our two areas of monitoring, are these application-specific views of how the environments are performing, how the applications are performing, the infrastructure at risk within those applications, and then when there are issues, being able to drill down to fix the problem quickly. The second type of monitoring that we provide is component-based monitoring. And what this gives users who tend to be operations and technology support teams, they want to be able to monitor specific technologies by technology. So they want to monitor Kafka, all their incidents of Apache Kafka or TIBCO EMS. So they can, with RTView, both audiences can get the information they need using a common communication platform for their different groups of users. So that's a good segue to RTView Enterprise, and let's talk about that for a few minutes. The main value of using RTView Enterprise is in enabling your support and DevOps teams to become highly proactive. RTView is primarily non-intrusive, primarily agentless application monitoring approach, and it supports applications based on different kinds of integration and messaging middleware, including Kafka, Solace, TIBCO, IBM MQ, and others, including frameworks such as Spring Boot. So it really gives users the ability to be able to get out-of-box monitoring and alerting for all of these technologies and the applications that are built on those technologies. So it's a single console view for the application support teams, a single pane of glass, if you will, across all of their application and middleware tiers. It provides historical and current data so that users can understand the context of value. Is it a high value? Is it a spike? Is it a trend? They can manage capacity more effectively if they know what the ranges of utilization are historically. And they can understand the business impact of problems with infrastructure components. So if I have a problem with a JVM, for example, what does that mean to the application? And can I prioritize responses based on the criticality of that application? It can centralize alerting across those technologies, of course, and it also reduces the number of alerts that the different support teams get because they're able to view alerts by only the technology or by only the service that they really care about. And they can do that whether the components are running all on premise or whether maybe using different applications or services or workloads running in different cloud platforms. So it gives you that ability to be able to see across these broad environments. One last comment I'll make is that it really gives you the ability also to future-proof your monitoring. As your applications evolve, you'll move to merge in different technologies and merge out other technologies. So being able to just add simple plugins as those things happen makes things easier, and teams can focus on other more important value added efforts. I'm going to show a couple of examples here to illustrate specifically what we want to show you. And this first view I'm going to show you is a table view, of course, but this looks at all of the services in a specific area. So you can actually see the service name in this online store group. And you can move up and down and across to view all of the performance metrics that are affecting these group of services. You can sort by the alert impact and by the business criticality. And you can also filter on just the individual services as you move down the table view here now. Now, what I want to show here is, this is the tabular view. I'm going to show you a heat map view of this same basic information. And for some kinds of users, especially in large systems, this is a great way to be able to see at a glance the health of all of the applications and services that you care about. You can navigate up and down the nav tree here to find just the specific groups that you want to keep an eye on, and that can be effective. Now, this is for the application users, the application support teams. What about the operations teams that care about the specific technologies? Well, what I can show you here is the next display is a technology-specific approach to this as well. So an operations group might use this more commonly because it allows them to see at a glance the performance of their different technologies across either a specific service, a group of applications, or the entire estate. We have this concept in RTView of key metrics, and because we care so much about enabling teams to be proactive, we spend a lot of time developing views in this area. So what you're looking at here are key metrics for this specific service, iris scan, and we're looking not at alerts, but we're looking at performance of these different components that make up the service as a percentage of threshold. So what this will do is give support teams an indicator of a component or infrastructure element that's at risk before it goes into an alert, so that you can take advantage and address that earlier. Now, this is a real-time view. How about a historical view of the same information? Well, we have these history heat maps, such as this one, that allow you to be able to see in a 24-hour period. In this case, you can change the time range as needed. But in this view, you're seeing a 24-hour history of the performance of all of the components that make up this particular service, this orders-service. And what you're able to see here is the impact of issues on a host. You're able to see here a JVM hog process that starts up randomly at about 12 noon. And you can see immediately that starts to impact the performance of some of your TIBCO EMS infrastructure, makes it more difficult for your BW engines to be able to pull messages off of the queues. And you can actually see that pending messages are backing up now. You can see that JVM process stops at approximately 2 p.m. and you can see that the infrastructure, the rest of the service, starts to recover after that. The pending messages slowly start to go down. It takes a while for them to flush out. But what this gives you is a very holistic view of how your service is performing. And if it's your responsibility to maintain the BW environment, if you're an operations user, it's very hard to do that effectively without having this holistic view of how your service is performing. So even operational users can take advantage of this kind of a display. So much as we have two different kinds of monitoring in RTView Enterprise, we have two different types of alerts as well, and those support the same service focus and then component focus. So Glenn's going to show you examples of those in a minute, but this ability to do service-based alerts is great because you can be as granular as you want to be around a specific service or subservice. We want to talk about the RTView Enterprise architecture. It's a distributed architecture that uses data server, which is basically a process that runs in your environment, whether it's on-premise or in clouds or a combination of clouds for modern hybrid applications. But what you're able to do is install a data server to run in your environment that collects data, keeps it in memory for high performance, and then can persist it into relational databases as needed, and then share that information with the central servers as needed. So as you, in the future, if you're using cloud now or hybrid now, this is great, it'll support you. If you're on-prem now and considering a possible move to private or public cloud later, you have the option to be able to seamlessly do that. For RTView Enterprise users, you also get access to RTView Cloud. And RTView Cloud is a hybrid software as a service that enables you to be able to create and view custom displays from the cloud. It uses some different managed services that allow you to be able to create these displays in a collaborative environment with people on your team, and then to publish them and easily get a URL that you can share with internal team members. But it's a great way to be able to quickly build from click and drag approach from palettes to build out things like these flow diagrams, which help users understand complicated applications and processes in a highly intuitive way. It'll make it easier, say, for a level 1 support team to be able to understand how an application is operating and to be able to escalate it correctly without having to go up to level 2 or level 3 to do that. The last thing I'll say on RTView Cloud is you don't send your data up to the cloud. The data stays behind your firewall in your data servers. You're only using the cloud services to actually build and maintain these types of displays and to publish them. We're often asked if RTView is like APM, and we want to be clear about what some of the differences are. APM is a great approach for solving certain kinds of problems for certain kinds of users, and not always so good when it comes to monitoring complicated middleware-based applications and services. In general, users have a lot of different options for monitoring, which can include open source approaches, which have benefits and drawbacks, including the admin tools, which have some advantages and some significant drawbacks, and APM. And APM requires the use of agents, as we've talked about it. It is not able to see below the level of a JVM. APM tools are great at monitoring JVMs, but if you're using TIBCO, for example, your TIBCO BusinessWorks engines run as a JVM. And you usually don't have problems at that level. Where you have problems are inside the level of the JVM, say activities in the process levels. And so you need to be able to get inside that black box. And the same thing goes for queues. If you need to be able to monitor JMS queues and understand what's happening there, APM has some severe limitations unless you want to do code injection. So if you want to learn more about how our approach to monitoring stacks up against different kinds of monitoring, including APM, there's a blog post here that you can see. So that covers the slide portion of the webinar. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn for the demo. Glenn?
Thanks, Ted. I appreciate the introduction. Also appreciate our attendees giving us some time. My part of this presentation, as Ted mentioned, is to provide you with a demonstration of the RTView solution. So if we look at the display in front of you, you'll see that we're focusing in on the application-centric views. Remember, Ted mentioned there were two different approaches. One was application-centric, another was aligned to the business, and the other was the component or the technology views, which are more aligned to IT. Underlying same metrics, presentation and organization is what is different. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that we've got these different business services. In your case, they're probably going to be different. Some of them will be the same. I can see the LEDs are telling me there's a problem with e-commerce. I can see problems with other systems, but e-commerce of the customer is the customer facing, so that is what I'm going to give priority. So I can drill into that, and I see that e-commerce as a business division or a business service is actually comprised of two different service groups. Again, this is following the business structure. So we have online store or plant store. I can see that I've got 6 alerts. I can see the online store is in a red alert state, and I can see that the alert impact is full. Let's go one layer down. Now we're looking at the applications that support that online store group or service. Accounting, order processing, order service. So we've got a table view, but we also have a heat map view. Now the heat map is very useful for highlighting problems. Table view is going to give you a lot of detail, but when one of the components changes behavior or changes condition, that's going to be reflected immediately in a very eye-catching heat map. So this is the heat map view. As I hover over some of the components, this happens to be the Tomcat, I can get a subset of the more detailed metrics. If I move over to the right, I can start impacting how this heat map changes behavior based on the underlying components. So here we're looking at alert impact, but I might want to say, okay, but I also want to see the alert criticality, how critical it is to the business. Different perspectives. So that's the heat map views. Now we'll go back to the table view, and from here we will drill into one of these services, order service. And at this point, if you look at the CI name column, a little bit to the right of the middle of the screen, you'll see the actual CI. So you'll see the hosts, you'll see the BW engines, you'll see the EMS queues, the EMS servers, the JVM. And if we were looking at the VMs, we would see those. If we're looking at the database, we'd also see those. So whatever set of components supports order service, they would be in this list, which means we would have filtered out everything that isn't supporting order service. Now, we know that each component can report maybe more than 100 different metrics. So how is anybody supposed to understand which metrics are important, which ones aren't? The answer to that is RTView has solved that problem. We have used best practice and subject matter experts, and we have said these 2 or 3 metrics are the key metrics for each resource type. So for example, messaging, pending messages, in messages, out messages, those are the key metrics. The other 80 or 90 are still available in the table format, but they're not typically useful at this level at any rate. We can sort by percentage threshold, and that will tell us which component is the most stressed. The importance of this screen now is that it enables you to be proactive. So nothing's broken at this point. Okay, that's important to realize. It's not broken. It's running in perfectly normal behavior, but it is stressed. So you know that if you increase the resources for that host 1, then you'll improve the quality of service. That was the current state. So now what we want to do is say, well, how do we get here? And so we've toggled over, we're looking at a 24-hour period. If you look at its extreme right, which is where we were with the current state, you'll see everything's green, looks good. But just an hour or so earlier, you can see that host was redlined. And you can see it stayed redlined all the way back until 8 a.m. You can see that the condition of that host most likely impacted the BW engines. They've changed color. They're being stressed as well. Maybe they're under-resourced, and so they're not keeping up with the process flow. And then further down the screen, further down the stack, you'll see EMSQ is also showing stress. Maybe it's responding poorly because it's not getting enough messages from the engines. So I'm glad that we looked at this screen. Okay, right now it looks okay, but a short while ago it really wasn't. And that was what your users are experiencing. Once again, more resources for that host solve a lot of problems. So we've shown you how RTView can monitor this system, and we've shown you how it can display changes in behavior through the displays. Now what we're going to look at are the alerts, because of course you might not be there when that error condition exists. So in this case, we're looking on the left at order service, on the right, the alerts table. Now, typically, you might have 300 or 400, 500 different current alerts across the whole enterprise. Oh, that's overwhelming, just too much noise. RTView therefore automatically filters that list. So right now, order service is selected on the left. The right will only show you those order service related alerts. If you went to online store, in other words, upper level, you'd see more alerts. E-commerce, yet more. Applications, the full set. Okay, so that's the alert in the alert table. But what I want to look at is the detailed view. So here now, I'm able to see the alert name, the component the alert is applied to, and the text message. In the bottom, we're able to see 15 minutes of history. Not enough to get a good picture. So we'll go back over 24 hours, and there, sure enough, an hour or so ago, we recovered from a problem where the CPU was pegged at 100%. Take a screen capture, send it to the administrator for that host, use it as the basis for asking for more resources. So that completes the application-centric views. Now what we're going to do is look at the technology or the traditional IT-centric views where we're looking at the different technologies. This is the overview page. So we're showing you a separate tile for each technology type that we're monitoring. You'll see that we've got a couple of the sort of traditional application servers like WebLogic and WebSphere. But we also have Dell Boomi representing some of the newer technologies. You'll see TIBCO is very well represented. We've got all of the core TIBCO middleware systems. Along with that, we've got Kafka, which is one of the recent additions to TIBCO messaging, as well as Solace. At the bottom, you'll notice that we're also monitoring some of the infrastructure layer, the JVM, the Docker, the VMware. So let's drill into one of these. We're going to look at Apache Kafka, with the understanding, I hope, that whatever we show you here, the equivalent can be seen for all of the other technologies, EMS or BW, whatever it is. So this is entirely appropriate. So here we're looking at an overview this time of the entire Kafka environment. We were looking at overview of the entire infrastructure. Now we're looking just at Kafka. We've done some analytics. We're producing some screens that show you the top 10 producers in terms of I/O. We're changing the history. We're going back up to the charts, and this time we're going to look at inbound messages. So we're showing you the brokers in terms of the highest number of inbound messages. Same thing with log flash latency. This is a very important metric with Kafka, probably not one you're familiar with if you're not a Kafka administrator, but this is one of the things you absolutely have to keep watching. So this is the Kafka overview. We're also showing you the partition availability. All of the messages coming in are deployed across topics and partitions on brokers. And so this is something that the availability of those partitions is a critical factor as well. Now, Kafka is organized by cluster. You create a cluster. A cluster has brokers, has producers, consumers, and together they own a Zookeeper, which is now, I think, optional, but that together makes a cluster. So here we're looking at two clusters. We're going to drill into one of those clusters, the CRM cluster, and we're going to be presented with a performance chart. This is showing me how that cluster is behaving. Far left of the chart, you'll see under-replicated partitions. Far right, you'll see log flash latency. These are both critical metrics to observe while you're trying to keep your Kafka environment running at an optimal state. So that's the performance view. Now we're going to go down and look at the engine view or the broker view. So here is a table listing of one cluster. I could have chosen to see all of them, but this is just one. I can look at, by now, the familiar heat map view. As I said before, where there's a table, normally you'll expect to find a heat map. Everything looks good. Everything looks just great. So we'll change the metric. The controlling our heat map, that also looks pretty good. So everything's green there. Everything's great. Now we'll go take a look at the other cluster. Oh, not so good. Broker 1 is having a problem. So let's explore that. We could go to the left or we could actually double click on that tile, and that will take us to the summary view. Now the summary view is giving us the expected trend lines and the key indicators, but the broker is very dependent upon the JVM. So this can be a big problem for administrators, because if they've got hundreds of brokers, hundreds of JVMs just for Kafka, let alone all the others, it can be very difficult for them to quickly and accurately identify which JVM is supporting which broker. RTView takes the guesswork out. We form that association. So we're now looking at the broker 1 and the JVM just for that broker. So now we're going to look at the topics views. Topics are very important, as you would expect in Kafka. So we've got several different perspectives. This is looking at all of the topics deployed on a particular broker. And you'll see in the table form, we've got a tremendous amount of detailed information. We're also monitoring the Zookeeper. Now, because the Zookeeper is probably not something you're familiar with, we're not going to drill into the function of the Zookeeper. I think you can think of it as an orchestrator if you like, but the important thing from a monitoring perspective is, again, the JVM. And so once again, we've created that association, saved you from trying to figure out which JVM is supporting which broker. Here's another view into topics. This time we're looking at the topics deployed within a cluster. So we're looking at these topics. We're showing, again, the critical information, the consumer lag, and the fetch requests per second, and the produce requests per second. We're surfacing all of the really important information so you don't have to go looking for it. Another view into a topic is to look at the summary for a topic. So this is a Kafka single topic summary. It shows you which broker it's running on, and you can go up and down that selection box because this topic is running on multiple brokers. You'll see, as you would expect, the key indicators, the failures on the right, the failed fetch produce requests, along with the standard inbound, outbound messages. I can change the time zone as I can with all of my trend charts to look at 24 hours. And while we're here, it's worth pointing out that you do have the option under the components views of selecting a time window. So now yet another topic view, this perspective. This is looking at the Kafka broker activity by topic. So this time we're looking at the topic, and it's a summary view. That one topic, how is that behaving across all of those brokers? So it's a different way of slicing and dicing. Now, messages are put onto those topics, of course, by producers. It is, after all, a messaging system. So the producer produces messages, and we have all of that information. The producer, as with most things in Kafka, are dependent upon the JVM, but we have the summary screen, and then we'll have this JVM screen. So everything you really need to know about the producers is displayed right there. If you've got producers, then of course you've got consumers. And so we have a similar set of screens. Single consumer summary, JVM, everything that was for the producer is there in the consumer. Of course, the important metric with consumer is lag. We already looked at that. So that completes the views of both the components and the application-centric views. Now what we're going to do is say, okay, remember that if we're not watching that screen, we might not be aware that there was a problem. So we need to receive an alert. Well, RTView comes with, out of box, a tremendous set of alerts. We're filtering now just looking at Kafka alerts, because that's our focus for today. And as we scroll down on the right, we'll see that there's probably close to maybe a little bit more than 2 pages. All of the alerts that you could reasonably expect to find will be here. If there was a need for an alert that we didn't have, contact us. We'll be happy to add that alert through the next release. So let's look at EMS. And we'll see that we've got an equivalent set of alerts for EMS. And the way that you use these alerts is you choose the alert type that you want, the alert name, maybe pending messages high. You select that alert, and then you would enable it. In this case, it's already enabled. So what we want to do is override that. We've said, okay, is enabled by default, and that suits us 99% of the time. But there are some queues that we want to treat separately. So we'll choose that queue, and we will add the override. We'll enable the override, and then we'll shift to the right, and we'll change those thresholds. We'll make this less sensitive. Quite often you'd want to make it more sensitive, but in this case, less sensitive. We don't want to get too many alerts from this queue. It's not a critical queue. So we save those settings, and now that queue is going to be treated a little bit differently from all of the other queues. That brings us back to where we started, the application overview, and I'll hand it back to Ted. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that covers the demo. We'll move on to questions in just a moment, but before we do that, I wanted to suggest some next steps. One option would be to schedule a WebEx with our technical team. If you like, we're happy to support you on a free trial, and we're happy to make an engineer available to support you and your team if needed. If you're not ready for a free trial yet and you'd like some more information, we have the option to do an online self-guided tour, and that's easily found from our website. From any page on our website, you'll see a self-guided demo. And Gia, can you please put that into the chat window as well, the link to that. So what this will allow you to be able to do is to scroll through different segments. So you can get an overview to RTView Enterprise, and then you can get some specific demos that include the services demo that you saw earlier. You can learn more about alerts or the different solutions that we have around TIBCO, Solace, Kafka. You can see any of those here.
Well, thank you, Ted and Glenn, and thank you to the attendees. We've been recording this webinar, and we will be sending that out via email within the next few days.